German beers are boring. No innovation for 100 years. If you think like this, you may be right. Until you try this beer. You've probably barely seen IPA from Germany, especially New England-style hazy IPA. It's true that they are rare in Germany, not because German breweries cannot make it good, but nobody drinks it in Germany. However, here you can find the best hazy IPA in Berlin, which tastes perfect, even at the almost same level as world's famous breweries, such as Treehouse or Trillium. Let's see how this German brewery, Fuerst Wiacek, brews their own beer in Berlin and creates the best double dry hopped IPAs.
We can't take beer on the tour, guys. I'm sorry. No glass in the brewery. There was an incident. Because when he's done a tour before.
I did.
Yeah, he's been before. Is there anyone else? There we go. See, I've got fans, man. I feel like a fucking celebrity. And you enjoyed it that much that you came back and you brought other people. Look at that. See, that's pedigree. That's how you know it's going to be the best tour of your life. When there's people who come back. I mean, I think they only come back because it's like the beers are for free. I mean, when they did the tour with the Czech as a brewery. So Fuerst Wiacek was founded by Georg Fuerst, who was there with the cap, and Lucas Wiacek, who is around somewhere. The original idea was that they wanted to make whiskey. And the easiest way to make whiskey is you make like a mash, like what you would make with beer, and then you could turn that into whiskey using a still. The whiskey was terrible, but they enjoyed the kind of process of making it, so they decided to turn that into making beer. And instead of just brewing like a pils or brewing a beer that they knew, they decided they would look through some recipe books and find a beer style that sounded good to them. So that style ended up being the New England IPA, the hazy IPA. And they actually were Germany's first people who brewed that style of beer. So the first Wiacek original beer, A Quick One While She's Away, was Germany's first ever New England IPA. And then they used to contract brew down in Bavaria at Frau Gruber, and every Friday they would bring the beer back and deliver the beer to all the places that were ordering it. Things got bigger and bigger, and then in 2021, so this is their first brewery. So this is that's where we're standing right now. The brewery is being expanded, which we'll see a bit later. We used to only have 12 fermenters, now we have 12 plus 6, 18 fermenters now, and we also have our first hop gun, which we'll also look at. So what we're going to do is we're going to start the tour at the place where the beer starts its journey. So if you'd like to follow me, please be careful, watch your step, because there is still sort of equipment lying around. We're going to start down here. All right, come in. So, careful. Whoa! No, I'm only joking. So this is where the beer starts its journey. This is our water tanks. So it used to be that we would take our water directly from the water table in Berlin, and then we would use various brewing tricks like acidulated malts and natron and kind of all this kind of stuff to make the water at the correct pH. Because to brew New England IPA, we want the water to be very neutral, because the New England IPA relies a lot on the more delicate flavors of the hops. And then so sort of in October last year, we completed a round of crowdfunding, and we bought this thing here, which is an osmosis filter. So that means we can use that filter to dial in any water settings that we require. So if you want to brew a pale ale with the same water minerality as what you would get in Burton-on-Trent in the UK, which is where the pale ales come from, we can dial that in. If we want the water kind of like in San Diego, where we might brew a West Coast IPA, we can dial it in. We can dial in whatever water settings we want. So that basically can put in extra minerals, extra acidity, take it out, as to alkalinity, and that's where we start our journey, because water is the most important ingredient to making the beer. If we use water that is too hard, then the beer won't taste right. If we use water that is too soft, then again the beer won't taste right. So we have to really check. And people take for granted the importance of water in beer. Home brewers especially, they think, I'm going to brew some beer, so I've got my recipe, so I'll just take the water from the tap, and they don't think about what's in that water, what minerals, what acidity, what pH is in that water, and then they worry why their beer tastes like shit. And it's for that precise reason. Water is the first building block of making a quality beer.
What temperature needs to be of the water?
That's dependent, because it's like when we're brewing, we take the water through different temperatures when we go into our mash. So we start at 60, 70, 80 because we want to extract maximum sugar. But when it's brewing, we want it to be between about 19 and 22 degrees so that the yeast doesn't die when we add it. So the water temperatures are variable. But most of the time, like, we would never add cold water, it's always going to be warm. That's why we've got a Heißwasser tank, because the water will purify the water, process the water, and then it'll get heated and it'll go into here so that we can put hot water straight into our mash tun. Because we don't want to add any cold water, we don't want to bring it up to the boil, we want the water to be hot already when we go to that process. What we're going to do now is we're going to go into our malt room, which is the next ingredient we need to add to the water to make the beer. So if you want to follow me, and dive right in. We have like malt storage over there. You can see some of the types of malt that we use in our beers. So we've got wheat malt, we've got Pilsner malt, which is the main malt used because for New England IPA, so we don't want any malt character. So in some beers that you try, you have that malty flavour, that sort of sugary caramel taste. But for New England IPA, we don't want any of that. We want the mildest, palest malt we can get, which is Pilsner malt. I think over here we might have some acidulated malt, which is still, yeah, so that's sour malt. So that's what we used to use to balance out the pH of the water. But because we're still sort of moving over to a new system, we're still sort of cooking our malt bill with a little bit of sour malt to bring the water pH slightly higher or lower. So this is where our malt, so in every one of our beers we don't just use one type of malt, we use Pilsner malt, wheat malt, oat malt. If we're brewing stouts, we might use chocolate malt, we might use best malt. If we want to make a West Coast IPA, we want to have a bit more of that caramelly taste for the fest beers and things like that. We want to use like a sort of a Vienna malt maybe. And what we do is we work out our quantities and then they get added into this hopper, which is what mills the malt down into a fine powder that then can be added to the water. But we don't mill so fine. We like to leave a little bit of the husk in there. Because when we go to our brew house, which is the next place we're going to go to, we go from our mash tun, which is where we make our wort for the beer. But when we get to our Lautner tun, we want to create a bed of the malt husks to help filter the liquid that goes through there. So when it passes into our kettle, there's no sort of mull or grain left in there. So it's as clear as it can get for that process in the brew. So this is our silo. So this brewery is very, very modern. So a lot of breweries have big brew teams. We only have 3 people in our brew team to brew over 500,000 litres of beer per year. And the way that we do that is because we have a very modern system. So we can put in the grain mill for 3 or 4 beers in here, and then it will store into here, and then we can trigger the brewing process to start when we're not even in the building. Lucas can do it from his phone. So this will store the malt bill in here, and then we can just set that off going, and we can make a beer while we're not even in the building. So if you can look though, you see there's a pipe here. So once our malt bill is from here into there, it travels up that pipe, and you see it goes out of the room, and it's going to take us to the next part of the tour. But if you have any questions so far, please let me know. If you want to ask any questions, don't be afraid, but I won't answer them. This is our mash tun. So if you look, you can see that the greeny, bluey, turquoisey cylinder that came from in there comes to here. So that brings our grain bill and drops into here, which we mix it with water. And when we've done that, we brew it up to different temperatures. So we take it up to 60 degrees for 10-20 minutes, 70, 80, 90, because what we're trying to do is take the maximum amount of sugars and proteins out of those grains, so that further down the line we can use those sugars to feed the yeast to make the beer. But also we want some of the proteins for the mouthfeel and for the sort of the overall sort of thickness of the beer, essentially. In here, it mashes up and gets turned into wort, which is the first process of the beer. So the wort is just a mixture of water and the malts that we use. The malts can be, like I said, just classic malts like Pilsner malt, Vienna malt, chocolate malt, or we can also add the sour malts, but then also wheat malt and oat malt, which is still classed as Reinheitsgebot as well because they're a malt. Then the next step is our Lautnerton. So this is essentially a filter. So what we do is the liquid comes out here and goes into here, and then we use a process called sparging, which is where we suck the liquid out of the bottom, and then we fire that liquid back out of the top across the husks and the sort of the particles of grain to keep extracting those sugars. So it's like almost like a mixture. And then if you look inside, you can see that there's like a grate in there, and that's where all those husks that I said that we keep in lay on the top of it and create a natural filter barrier. So that keeps filtering and filtering and filtering through. Then finally, we get to our kettle, and at this stage, we filtered out most of the sort of malt grains that are left in there. But this is the first point in the brewing process where we're going to add our hops. So here we're going to add our bittering hops. So in the old days, all the hops would be added at this phase, and that's why a lot of old school beers, West Coast IPAs, English IPAs, things like that, have less of that kind of fruity hop taste. It's just bitterness really, because that's what we're adding here. Because the water is such a high temperature that it just draws the alpha acids out of the hops. There's none of those aromas coming out. Well, some of them come out, but it's not so kind of pronounced. It's boiled up and it's still mixing. We might add some more hops, and that presents a little bit of aroma, but still mainly for bittering. Then it comes out of here and it goes through a machine underneath called the heat exchange, which is basically just a lot of pipes that go really fast and have a glycol cooling system alongside them, so that by the time they get over there to our fermentation tanks, the liquid from here is at round about that fermentation temperature that we want, between 19 and 22 degrees, so that when it gets there, we can add our yeast and we can start the fermentation process. And once we start the fermentation process and the yeast is added, that is the first point of the whole process that we can say that is beer. Until this point, it's still just wort. That is the first point of the process where it becomes beer. So we're going to go down to look at the fermentation tanks. But if anyone has any questions while we're here, please feel free. All right, easy. Love it. You're the best group ever. More questions. Let's go. These are our fermentation tanks. So like I said, these are our original 9 here. And then after our round of crowdfunding that we've done, then we've added these 6 here. So these are 3,000 litres. As you can see, there are ladders going up. So before we got our hop gun, which I'm going to show you in a bit, we were very old school about our dry hop additions. So we would just open the top of the tank and pour it in. But obviously that's not the best way to do it really, because you can get some contamination into the beer. There might end up being some secondary fermentation. It's less controllable. What you want is to keep it a sealed system. So we have a system now, which I'm going to show you in a minute, where we can take a part of the wort out, and we can add the hops into there, and the hops going underneath with pressure, and we make like a real super concentrated like version of the beer, and then we pump it back into the tank, so there's never any exposure to oxygen, and oxygen fucking kills beer. We don't want none of that. So normally, like from the fermentation, we get a CO2 blanket over the top, because as the beer brews, it's releasing CO2, and that kind of protects it, but it's not foolproof. So that's why we've got this new thing. But we still sometimes will dry hop through the top. If we're making fruit sours or the Berliner Weisse, we add all of our fruit into the top. Any coffee that we might add for the imperial stouts all goes in through the hatches on the top. But then, like I said, so if we move on down, so for most of our beers, the fermentation period is 4 weeks. We can directly from the fermentation tanks as well. We don't do any brightening or lagering. Once the beer is ready, package it. So that's why all of our beers are Natur Trub. That's why sometimes if you drink one of our IPAs that's really fresh, you might get some like real thick hop juice in at the end, like, because that's the best way to present the beer. So these are our new tanks, and if come with me over here, this little one is new. So this is what I'm saying. This is where we can take a part of the beer out of the fermentation tank, put it into here, then we can add our dry hop additions, our fruit additions, anything that we want to do. So we've got a beer called Palms right now, which we brewed for our birthday with coconut. We added a fucking huge tea bag sack of desiccated coconut into here. We drafted out part of the beer, left it in there to integrate with the coconut, and then we fired it with pressure back into the tank. And then the beauty of that is as well, we can keep doing it. So when we tried the beer, we felt it wasn't coconutty enough. So we put it back in here, more coconut went in, put it back in the tank, checked it again, and we can keep doing that process. Whereas when we just adding it from the top, it's much, much harder to say. We might end up adding more and more and more, and it might just become over much. Whereas if we do it this way, it's much more controllable. And this is brand new. This is like something that we've just invested in now. Yeah. So once we've done this and we've made our beer and it's fermented enough, 4 weeks usually, sometimes like maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks for lagers maybe, depending. We will take it from here, and like I said, so you can see that there's valves on the bottom. So we'll take a pipe directly from there and into the thing that's behind you, which is our canning line. So if you want to follow me, we'll go and have a look at that. And the canning line is outside there among craft breweries. It's very, very high tech. A lot of craft breweries have a much more old school system where the cans come from up here. So our system here is vacuum sealed all the way down to this point. And then it gets blasted with pure CO2 to kill any contamination that might come in. Then if you can see, it's like a magazine in the gun. And that's the decal onto the top, which is pressure forced on, and it comes through here. And this is like a salon for the can, so it gets its hair dried by these machines. It gets a little massage from this machine, and it comes through here. And then as you can see, look, so we've got our labels on for Siemens down. So it comes through here, gets a label put on, and makes this journey through here to here, where I am waiting. And can you remember what I do to each can when it comes out? It gets a kiss, thank you very much. It gets a kiss from me. And then I put it in the box, and it's ready to go. Sorry? Yeah. So these they can be used all over the world. They're very easy to transport, they're recyclable. They allow us much more control over our packaged products when they leave this brewery. So normally when you keg in a steel flask, which we use just for Berlin, when that goes to a bar and they keg it on, they have CO2. And what happens is the CO2 goes down a pipe into the beer and it forces the beer up out of the nozzle. But as the CO2 doing that, there is CO2 constantly being added into the beer. So sometimes you might go somewhere and if the CO2 settings aren't right, the beer is overcarbonated. That's why sometimes when you get a beer in like a bar, you watch them pouring it and it's just foaming and foaming and foaming because the CO2 settings are too high. This, we fill the bag inside, and then when you keg it on, the CO2 actually goes around the bag and just, it's like squeezes the bag. So the beer that's in there is exactly as it left the brewery. And that's why we believe that this is the best possible way to send beer to places. Also, it's much more shippable, and like I said, it's recyclable in every country because Fuerst Wiacek mainly exports to other countries. Our business in Germany is much lower than our export business. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to now take the final steps of the beer journey. So we've gone from the water, we've added our malt, we've gone to our brew house, we've come through the brew house, we've gone into our fermentation tanks. We're now packaged in cans or in kegs. And then we're going to go in here, the vault. Wow, that's fucking packed. All right, we can still fit. Go on in and go that way. Carefully down there.
Sit right across.
As we brew mainly New England IPAs, I don't know if you guys know us for that. New England IPAs, the flavours, the aromas are very volatile. So when we make our beer, we want to store it as cold as possible and keep it cold. We would like to do full cold chain delivery and things, but it's not possible in Germany. I mean, we have to send things by UPS. So what we try and do is we keep the beer cold from as soon as it's packaged, it comes in here. And the only time it's not kept cold is when it gets sent out to you guys or to trade or whatever. And then if you look here, you can see some of the hops that we use. So we mainly, because we're brewing New England IPA, mainly use hops from America. But as things have changed and trends have happened, we've got a lot of New World hops from New Zealand, from Australia, Galaxy, Motueka, Nelson Sauvin. So yeah, that's our hop bills. Up here we've got some classic German hops, the Tettnang. This is like a super concentrated hop liquid. This was Mosaic, and we use this in our beer called Invisible Eyes, if you want to try that. So Citra, so that's what they look like. Little tiny pellets, super hyper concentrated. Like if you ate that now, you wouldn't be able to taste for about a week. It's super bitter. And so now we're going to come out of the fridge and go to the last part of the journey, which is out here. Anyway, so this is the last part of the process. So we package it up and we send it out to you guys, and then you come and do a tour with me, and the circle of life is complete. So that's the end of the tour. Thank you so much. Let's go get drunk.